This is exam 4 review for PED 100. So for chapter 1, this is what I expect you to remember and have learned. What is wellness and what are the 4 things that make up wellness? Next, what are the 6 components that make up wellness? Remember, they are physical health, emotional health, intellectual health, spiritual health, social health, and environmental health. Remember that you need to be able to tell me how each person would meet each of those components. The next thing is SMART goals. What does SMART stand for? It stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-stamped. The last thing from chapter 1 that you should remember is physical activity versus exercise. Physical activity is all physical movement regardless of the energy expenditure or reason for it. Exercise, on the other hand, is performed specifically to enhance health and/or fitness. So for chapter 2, we had the exercise principles is what we had. The first one is the overload principle. Next, principle of progression. Third, principle of specificity. Fourth, principle of recuperation. And the last one is principle of reversibility. Remember what each of them are and what each of them do. Also, we talked about warm-up versus cool-down. Why is it important to do each of them and what is achieved in each of them? For chapter 3, you need to be able to define what cardiorespiratory endurance is. Also, what ways can we measure it? More specifically, what is the most valid measurement for it? And that is the VO2 max. We also talked about the most accurate way to take your pulse. Remember that you need to count your pulse for an entire minute. Do not do it for 30 seconds or 10 seconds and then multiply. Make sure that you do it for a full minute. We also talked about responses versus adaptations to exercise. Responses are the ones that are going to be short-term or immediate, such as your heart rate increasing or your stroke volume increasing. Remember, these are short-term changes. Adaptations to exercise are going to occur over lengths of continuous exercise, such as resting heart rate decreases, VO2 max increases, respiratory muscle endurance improves. Remember, if you do not maintain these adaptations, they will be lost. And also remember that cardiorespiratory endurance is lost quicker than muscular endurance. Chapter 4 is muscular strength and endurance. Be able to tell me what the difference is. Remember, muscular strength is how much one can move at one time. So that is your max. Muscular endurance is how many reps over a long period of time that you can do. Also, how does one improve on each of these areas? For muscular strength, you're going to have high resistance and low reps. For muscular endurance, you're going to have low resistance and high reps. We also talked about several different types of muscle fibers. There were 3 of them. You've got fast twitch, slow twitch, and intermediate fibers. Be able to know the characteristics and which one would be classified as so. The last thing that we talked about for chapter 4 that I want you to remember is positive work versus negative work. Positive work is also known as concentric work, and that is when the muscle shortens during movement against gravity or resistance. Negative work is also known as eccentric work, and this is where the muscle lengthens during movement against gravity. So chapter 5 was flexibility. What is flexibility? It is defined as the full range of motion of a joint. There was 4 different types of stretching that we talked about. Be able to determine which one falls into which category and be able to provide examples for those. So we have ballistic stretching, we've got dynamic stretching, we've got static stretching, and then we've got that proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation stretching, or PNF, which is the partner stretching. Of those 4, you need to be able to tell me which one is the best way to improve your flexibility, as well as when that should be done. For warm up and cool down in regards to flexibility, which one is done for your warm up and which one is done for your cool down, and why that is so. For chapter 6, this is body composition. What is body composition, or how is it defined? The definition is the relative amounts of fat and fat-free tissues, which include your bone, muscle, and organs in your body. And remember that it is always shown as a percentage. Next, you need to have the optimal body fat percentages. 8 to 19% for adult men, 12 to 15% for young adults, 21 to 32% for women, and then 21 to 25% for young adults. We talked about several health conditions that can be linked to being overweight or to being obese. Some of those were heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, sleep apnea, menstrual abnormalities, difficult with conception and pregnancy. Look over that list and be able to tell me things about those. Next thing that we talked about was the gain of body weight and those obesity patterns. One of them is specifically for men, and that is called the android pattern of obesity, and that is where fat is primarily stored in the upper body and around the waist. The one for women is called the gynoid pattern of obesity, and then fat is primarily stored in the waist, hips, and thighs. So chapter 8, what is the definition for nutrition? You can look that up in the PowerPoints. Also know what good nutrition includes. Know the difference between macro and micro. Macro are the big ones. Those are your fats, carbs, and your proteins. Your micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals. Have an idea of what type of things fall into those as far as foods go, so you know that you're meeting your macros and your micros. Know what the current guidelines is for the foods here in the United States. And then also for water, just know what percentage of your body is water and the things that it is used for, such as regulating body temperature, digestion and absorption of nutrients, and then blood formation and elimination of waste products. Know how much you're supposed to have each day and what amount could also be fatal. Chapter 9, we talked about hormone and your appetite influences. One hormone particularly tells you when to eat, and one tells you when to stop. Be able to know which those are. We also talked about the 3 calories in versus calories out scenarios. Which one is for weight gain, which one is weight loss, which one is weight maintenance. Be able to explain those. For your weight loss, how is that achieved and how much? Now, when people are setting goals for weight loss, some of those goals are not necessarily healthy for them. So you want to set a goal of 1 to 2 pounds per week, and that's that 3,500 calories that you're going to eliminate. We also talked about that fancy equation, which was burning 250 calories and decreasing your caloric intake by 250 calories each day. That gets you your 500. You multiply that by 7. That's how you get your 3,500 calorie deficit. For balanced diet, just know what things that you should have, things that you should avoid. Look at the certain types of fats that are good for you, those that you need to try to keep at a minimum. The other thing that we talked about in here was your metabolic rates. You have 2 different ones. You have the exercise one, and then you have the resting one. Just know which one is influenced by what. For example, your resting metabolic rate is your amount of energy expended while sedentary. This is influenced by your age and your gender, as well as the amount of lean body mass an individual possesses. So chapter 11 was stress. Be able to define what stress is. What are the things that causes stress? What's that definition or that fancy word for it? For good and bad stresses, what is the good stress called? And, what does it do for you? And then distress, that's the bad stress. How does that influence one's life? Definitely need to relook at the coping mechanisms and the adapting mechanisms that people use. Which one is positive? Which one is negative? Just look at those, make sure that you understand that positive is the coping mechanisms, negative is the adapting mechanisms. Also be able to tell me what types of examples or actions would fall into each category. As far as the personal factors that may influence how one deals with stress, those would be the different types of personalities. Which one of the 4 handle stress well, which ones don't handle stress well. Be able to explain the fight or flight response. Could also be another thing that falls under this chapter. All right, so chapter 13, the purpose of the recovery time. Why do we need that 24 hours in between the workout session? What things can happen to us if we don't abide by that rule? The 10% rule, we also talked about this in chapter 2. What is the 10% rule? Why is it important for us to follow it? Exactly what is it? So remember that we're going to increase either the intensity or the time by 10%, and that's every 2 weeks. As far as RICE goes, what does RICE stand for and why is it used in order to help treat injuries? Some of the risk factors for unintentional injury. These would include, let me get there, having that unsafe attitude, being overly confident, having it in your mind that it won't happen to me, craving that excitement or thrill seeking, but it also could include the use of alcohol and drugs because that can play a role in our perception of things and our reaction to things, such as also stress is another one, and then environmental factors as well. The last thing would be the choking versus CPR. When do you do CPR? When do you do the Heimlich maneuver? What type of things do you need to be looking for in those situations in order to determine if you can step in and help, or what type of actions you need to take? For the injuries as well, just look at the common ones and have an idea of how those would be treated. All right, the last chapter. Chapter 14 is one that you have not been tested over yet, so this is the one that you're going to see several questions about. The other chapters, you are going to see a few questions from each, but this is the one that you're going to see the majority of them from, just simply because, like I said, you haven't been tested over them. So for cancer, what is cancer? How is it defined? Is it a single disease or is it a collection of diseases? If it's a collection, how many? What is the leading cause of death? What is the second leading cause of death? Know what a tumor is and the different types. How are they determined? So how does one determine if they have cancer or not? What do they have to have done? What is that fancy word for how cancer is spread? Know the avenues of how it is spread. What are types of things that cause cancer? And if it is a known thing to cause cancer, what is the term for it? And then particularly, just look at the ones that we talked about in the online lecture. Which one's the most deadliest, which one's the most common, those that are common in males versus females and so forth. Look at those, look at the symptoms. Also look at the staging of cancers, and also look at the types of treatments that they have available to them. While you are looking over this, if you do have any questions, just let me know and I will do my best to try and help you and guide you. Remember that your exam is going to be on Wednesday, April 15th. This is going to take place at your regular time. So if you normally came at 9 o'clock in the morning, it will be 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, April 15th, 2020, just so there's no confusion. If you came at 10, it's going to be open at 10. If you come at noon, it's going to be open at noon. I will email out a code for you to get on Top Hat. So just like we did with exam 3, just make sure that you're looking for that code before your class time. Usually about 3 or 4 minutes before class, I'll try and send that out just so you can start exactly on 9 o'clock or 10 or 12. For those of you that do have extended time, you will be given that. So if you took your exam at 9, you will have until 10:30. The rest of you will have an hour to take the exam and submit it to Top Hat. For this exam, there are no short answer questions. I may put in a bonus question. I may not. I haven't decided that yet. But like I said, if you do have any questions while you're studying for this exam, just let me know. I'm here to help. If you have any other questions about what you need to do in order to finish out this semester, just let me know that too. Thank you. Have a good day.